Hello everyone, I hope I'm loud and clear. In case not, then please do type in on the chat section and I'll make sure that everything is well audible. So welcome, my name is Shubhra Sinha. I welcome you to this webinar that's hosted by Denave on cybersecurity for BFSI. Of course, a very, very relevant topic, and the relevance is just increasing, day on day as digitization and as the online medium picks up steam, and with everything coming to the forefront, cybersecurity, of course, is the hot trending topic, and very, very happy to have an industry veteran with us today who's going to be walking us through this concept and answering few questions that must be put in the amongst the audience today. Before that, quick introduction about me. I represent Denave and I lead the marketing function at Denave. And it is amazing to be talking to a set of people today who are, of course, here to gather some knowledge, I'm sure, and to know a little bit more about what we have to address here in this topic. Friday, second half. So I'm sure you guys have, parked your work for this week, and you're all sorted for the coming week. And, we are hoping that this time works for all of you to just sit back and listen to our speaker, give some nugget of information that would be useful for you in making some business decisions. So at this point, allow me to introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Dheeraj Arakkal, Head Security Solutions for APAC South at Spirent Communications. He has over 16 years of experience and is responsible for developing Spirent's, he's responsible for developing Spirent security business and market in the APAC South region. Employing new strategies for demand generation and various digital approaches for promoting Spirent's niche solutions is one of his key area of expertise. So very, very happy to have you here, Dheeraj. May I request you to switch on your camera and say a quick hello to our audience? Dheeraj, all. Hi, so you're on mute, Dheeraj.
Hey, thank you, Shubhra. Thanks for that introduction. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure being here.
You took a minute there and my heart kind of sank. I thought the tech glitch has walked in. I'm glad it didn't. You're on mute again, Dheeraj.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, yes, yes. Great. So we are looking forward to a great, engaging session today, and we are hoping that
I have unmuted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me all?
Yes, absolutely, loud and clear.
Perfect. So let me quickly share the screen.
Before that, just a quick, give me a moment, and we'll get on to the agenda very, very quickly. Before we jump on to the main agenda to the audience, I just want to quickly walk you through, the company that I represent and a quick introduction about Denave. So Denave is a global sales enablement organization, and we've been in business for over 21 years now. And of course, there has been a lot of phases and a lot of evolution that the company has gone through, and the latest one, of course, is something that all businesses are right now going with. That how do you make businesses get back to business faster? So being a sales catalyst, of course, Denave is leveraging all its tech-enabled services, as well as ensuring that through opportunities such as remote selling, cloud, digital automation, analytics, how do we get them all to the forefront to ensure that the buyer and the seller ecosystem are able to converse better, and there's more and more sales happening. So I will not delve deeper into this. Like I said in the previous webinar, this is a topic that's very close to my heart. Denave is the closest subject for me. So I can go on and on this, but I will stay put here and I will go back to the main agenda. And before I hand over to Dheeraj, a very, very quick walkthrough for the audience here. Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Zoom, pretty friendly platform and being used extensively for all these virtual interactions these days, not just professional, but also personal. I think a lot of birthday parties and anniversary parties happening on Zoom these days. So you all know pretty much how to, hopefully, how to use the platform, but just in case you don't. So very simple, in case you have questions, in case you need to ask anything, there is a chat section. You can type your question there also. In case you're facing a technical glitch, anything that you want to know, chat section is good enough. Otherwise, you can also if you have a specific question that you want to address to the speaker, please put it in the Q&A section, and if it can be addressed through text, of course, it will be addressed right there. We also have Ivan here who can support us with an immediate response. But if it needs a deeper delve and it needs further deep diving, then of course it will be taken up in the designated Q&A slot. So we'll see how we go along. Of course, there's a hand raise button also on your screen. So if you need some immediate question or anything, please raise your hand virtually, and somebody from the team will attend to you. So I do see some hand raises here, and we'll get back to each one of you very, very shortly. So without further ado, and without taking any more time here and jumping straight to the agenda, I will go behind the screen, and Dheeraj, over to you.
Thank you, Shubhra, for that. And a quick check before I begin. I wanted to make sure that I'm loud and clear. Hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, all well.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So before we begin, let me quickly share my screen so that we have a clear understanding of where we are. All right, so I hope the screen is visible. So first of all, a very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining the webinar on breach and attack simulation tools and cybersecurity trends and technologies by Spirent Communications in partnership with Denave. I would like to start by borrowing the quote of Tim Cook of Apple, right? He once said, if you put a key under the mat for your partner, a burglar can find it too, right? Cyber criminals are using every technology and tools primarily tool at their disposal primarily to hack into organization. If they know there is a key hidden somewhere, they won't stop until they find it, which is the case with any organization where everyone knows that there is a key hidden somewhere. Having said that, we need smarter, better ways to keep away from these attackers, finding them and breaching our organization. How we do this is by being proactive and making sure that we have the right defense even before the bad guys attempt anything on us. So today, let's take a look at how breach and attack simulation tools would help understand if an organization's security measures really work. Rather than living on assumptions, are they really put into use? So that is the topic for today's conversation. And let's have a quick look at our agenda. Here is it for you. So we'll first take a look at the current state of cybersecurity affairs, the various statistics and breaches across the 5 years globally. We'll also take a look at the various tactics used by these threat actors primarily to breach into these organizations. Now, after that, let's try to break down the concept of proactive security validation, understand what a breach and attack simulation tool is, and also take a look at or take a stab at Spirent's concept of breach and attack simulation. And we would also understand and assess what are the criteria to look for evaluating an ideal breach and attack simulation platform. So that is in a nutshell about today's agenda and conversation. So to have a look at the statistics, right? I'm not here, ideally here to inflict scare, especially because in such a situation like today's where we are going through a lot of crisis. But the reality is that cybercrimes are rising, unlike ever before, including the ones from state-funded groups. We are seeing a lot of political tensions, and of course, it being a trigger for state-funded organizations to work against, governments in countries. And it also includes various other organized crime syndicates, and from them all the way to your typical script KPs. So if you look at the graph here, it shows that a number of personal records has been stolen in the last 3 years, and they are hitting the roof, right? If you look at the statistics, the first 5 months of this year saw more than 8 billion records that have been leaked as per various sources, and that is ever high as compared to yesteryears. And if you look at the kind of entities that have got breached, the breached entities are all highly technology-driven organizations or governments who deal with a lot of confidential and sensitive, personally identifiable information. So if I have to name a few, it includes Microsoft. I'm sure that you would have read about the Marriott Hotels breach, which is probably the second breach in 3 years. Israeli government, where we see a lot of innovation and research coming in the form of cybersecurity products. They got breached, Tesco, and so on and so forth, right? So for example, if I have to take the Microsoft incident, 250 million records spanning across 14 years was exposed to the public, which could ideally be used for malicious intent, including IP information, customer email details, and other linkable PII data was outright available. So these incidents reinstate that even organizations with the best of breed solutions are not assured from a breach or a data breach. And moreover, no defense mechanism is ideally adequate enough to enough until tested for its effectiveness on a continual basis by recreating real attacker behaviors. And if we look at India as an example, I'm sure that every day as days goes by, along with the COVID statistics, the front page of newspapers are filled with a lot of these breaches. And there are a lot of government entities that got breached, including banking environments, banking sectors, to a lot of pharma companies. So that primarily reinstates, even with the kind of investments that goes in cybersecurity, no organization is inevitable from a breach, right? So we'll take a quick moment here for a quick poll. Over to you, Shubhra, for that poll.
Thanks, Dheeraj. So I think as we progress, there is also a sense of, we also want to understand the audience sentiment here. And there are some quick questions that we are launching through the poll section. And we encourage you to participate as much so that we have a sense here. So the question here is, because the audience here on live, who's watching this webinar on live streaming, will not be able to view the question. So I'll read it out. Simple question. Do you have a fear of data breaches now, even more since you're working from home? And the response options are yes, somewhat, no. You're absolutely not fearful. So I see people still voting. We have about 55% people who voted. So we'll give it another 5-7 seconds for everyone to just vote. And then we'll move on. Okay. Sure. So I'm ending the poll now. Yeah. So very, very, I think, evident and, not a surprising response at all, because the vote is tilted towards yes. People are fearful more than ever since now they're working from home. So Dheeraj, anything you want to say to that?
That's a great response. Like you very clearly said, it is not really a surprise at all. And like I stated earlier, right? I mean, everyone has that fear today. Everyone knows that there are challenges, especially from a cybersecurity standpoint, that people have to face when going remote. And I believe organizations also believe in that, and that is where a lot of input is coming in the form of going digital, making sure that their environment is completely secure. And today we will have a look at those threats that are primarily applicable in situations like this, right? So we will try and see the statistics, how how we can relate the poll response to the various statistics that we see from the market today, right?
Sure. Please carry on, Dheeraj.
Sure. So here is an analysis of the top tactics used by the threat actors in 2020 for the real breaches, right? So as you all know, hacking still is prevalent. It pretty much, if I compare with the earlier reports from Verizon and various other organizations, it is on a declining trend compared to yesteryears. Errors definitely wins. So if I go back one by one, you do have classification of social attacks to malware scenarios to human errors and all of that. However, errors definitely win the best supporting action for this 2020, especially because they are equally common as social breaches and more common than malware and ever present across all industries. All this while, malware was the kind of mechanism that was utilized by cyber attackers primarily to deliver and attack an organization. However, in today's case, if we look at it, in the last 3 to 4 years, the human errors, I would call it as misconfiguration or misdelivery, all of them are primarily getting into a state where, that is the primary method utilized by hackers or attackers to gain access to an organization. So for example, exploiting a vulnerability, both zero-day and others fall under the hacking, and errors include misconfiguration and misdelivery, right? All this reinstates the need for organizations to be more proactive and having that need for assessing how effective their defense mechanisms are working before the fact than after the fact. And this primarily reminds me of an instance where a highly reputed financial organization was breached a few years ago. I mean, it was 3 years ago, and it still stays very relevant, and it has become more or less synonymous for a breach. And in that instance, almost 140 million people were impacted, and the organization had to shell out 1.2 billion in the form of compensations against the breach. So being a financial entity, they were handling a lot of sensitive data. They were working on utilizing customers' PII data, which is the personally identifiable information. And in fact, I've heard the CISO talk about the kind of comprehensive security program they had and the kind of investments that they have made in the form of security technology. But if we go through the actual incident or the chronology of what really has happened, it was rather a small vulnerability that existed in their network security control that was exploited by the attackers. And even before the organization or these technology controls could fix those, it took them more than 6 months to even detect or respond to such a breach. And by then, the damage was already made. So it in turn means that all the money spent on security, the millions that was spent on security has gone waste without even having that right assessment done on their effectiveness, right? So I wanted to slightly give a different perspective of how things typically work in an organization when they look at assessing the effectiveness of security controls, right? So here is a typical chain of events that an organization considers before choosing a threat prevention or a threat detection platform or any other security platform. And this is how it gets operational. We very well know that there are multiple research organizations, analysts, and providers like Gartner and research firms like Everest, and so on and so forth, who primarily does a lot of market research in terms of understanding the trends, both from an attacker's perspective and an organization's perspective. And most of the organizations rely completely on these kind of analyst firms and research firms to understand the existence of security platforms. And based on the various claims, or at times what is seen in the lab, the solutions are taken through to the next stage. And that is how they get into a stage of getting into a proof of concept or a proof of value in very clearly assessing how well that technology would add value to an organization. And that is a typical concept any CISO would, or a security leadership would approach in terms of understanding these technologies. What is the business value that it is bringing in? And a POC is done in a staging environment. And they define a certain set of success criteria, primarily to understand its relevance to the environment. And of course, hoping that introduction of such a platform is definitely going to increase the security posture. And based on that analysis, they deploy the platform in a production environment where the solution is tweaked to meet the various business requirements. Settings are changed and reconfigured. And this is a continual process, especially in today's enterprises, where it is completely dynamic in nature, right? You have business requirements that takes precedence. Even if we take an example of firewall, a firewall policy keeps getting changed every now and then, probably to enable business needs of that organization without even understanding what is the real impact of security that it gives to it. And for that assessment, in typical organizations, traditionally what we have seen is that they might go through a point in time exercise, maybe once in 6 months or once in a year, to have an end-to-end firewall audit or a DLP policy audit or various other audits to understand where their policy change is done. However, the dwell time of an attacker is much higher because every day things are keeping on changing. So of course, there is an opportunity for an attacker to be there and perform covert actions. Now, what is really required? We really have to look at it from a completely proactive basis, right? So we looked at the traditional aspect of deployment. Until deployment, we have a confidence or an assumption that, yes, these are basic things that a new security technology would deliver. However, we do not know if that is actually being delivered or not. So for that purpose, we definitely need something called as actively evaluating the effectiveness of that particular security control. And again, I wanted to go back and relate to a couple of examples where I said, the organization that was breached in 2017, they had a very comprehensive vulnerability management program where the hackers or the attackers utilized a small vulnerability that existed. Though they had a program, they did not really assess in an active manner the effectiveness of their vulnerability management program, or they did not assess the effectiveness of their detection capabilities. If someone was trying to hack into your network or attack your network, they did not really assess the effectiveness of the rules that were available on their detection platforms or the algorithms that were available to detect unknown threats. So there reiterates the need for a continual active evaluation of your security controls on an ongoing basis. And we should not be stopping there, not just by actively evaluating them, but also at the same time have a mechanism to continually remediate them as and when your findings are assessed or understood. Of course, we need to ensure that there is a mechanism to actively remediate, right? So let me quickly go back to various ways of actively evaluating security. Few are very common, few are very relevant. Most of it are compliance driven. And if you could see that, I mean, when we are talking about active evaluation of security, there comes a set of residual risks as well, right? So I mean, there is a definite set of risk. And also, we'll have to also look at what is the outcome or the reward it can actually give. So if I take an example of one form of active security evaluation, we all know vulnerability scanning today is more or less a compliance-driven activity, and every regulation mandates vulnerability scanning as an activity that needs to be done. But if you look at it, is it actually kind of resolving the problems? Is it making sure that the vulnerabilities are completely getting fixed and not being able to be exploited by the attackers? And of course not. And that is where, if you look at the risk of it, there is very little bit of risk, especially because we are not performing any intrusive attacks. And for that particular reason, the reward is also extremely low. I mean, we are only getting a report which may be prone to a lot of false positives. Somebody will have to go through and interpret those reports and primarily take action against it. And in quite a lot of cases, we have pretty much seen that that is a big overhead, and most of these vulnerabilities never gets fixed, especially the low critical ones or the medium ones. And especially because of these reasons, the repeatability is also extremely high. Now let's look at another form of active security evaluation, penetration testing. I'm not talking about the run-of-the-mill penetration testing activities. I would probably refer to the exploitative penetration testing, where we are employing a real hacker to try and break into an organization's network from in an ethical way, right? So that kind of an activity definitely involves a lot of risk. And of course, because of the risk involved, and more or less, it especially is a highly resource intensive kind of an activity, a huge cost is also involved. And more or less, it all depends. The effectiveness of these kind of penetration testing, again, depends on the credibility of the organization who's performing it. And also at the same time, the credibility of the person and the talent of the person who is doing it. And there are cases when we have seen these kind of assessments typically take more than 6 months. And of course, because of that reason, organizations can definitely not afford or also even consider, having this as an ongoing or a continuous solution. That is where the significance of breach and attack simulation tools come into place. And it is rather a very niche kind of area that people are talking about, especially CISOs are wary about today, when they very well know that including a newer security technology into the security landscape is primarily not increasing the security posture. But if we are making sure that the existing security controls are working as expected or working effectively, that automatically increases the security posture of an organization. So a breach and attack simulation tool primarily is very low risk in nature, where a real attacker behavior is simulated. And especially because of a real attacker behavior is being simulated, the reward is high. You can very clearly understand the various defense mechanisms that we have put in place, especially to defend against these attacks, how well they are performing in a real-time scenario. So it's all about being proactive even before somebody attacks your organization, utilizing various of these indicators of compromise, how well the existing defense mechanisms can defend against this and prepare an active defense. And of course, because of that, since this being a completely automated kind of a platform or a solution, it becomes and continual assessment, and we can the repeatability gets extremely high. So now I just wanted to take one more quick second for a quick question in terms of understanding your level of understanding of platforms and security. So I would let Shubhra take up that poll question so that we have a better understanding.
Hey, thanks, Dheeraj. So quickly, we are talking about breach and attack simulation, and just wanted to get a sense here from the audience here. I've just launched a poll to understand. The question is, have you heard of breach and attack simulation? That it'll help Dheeraj have a sense of the audience that is here today, and so he can build on his conversation points from there on. So the audience has started to vote. So you definitely have a mix here, Dheeraj.
Yeah.
I'll just give it another 5 or 7 seconds more for people who are just still trying to make up their minds. Simple question, and I think it'll just help us frame the talk points and
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the overall concept for how Dheeraj addresses this point will be helpful to get a sense as to where our audience is. Okay, so I'm stopping the poll now, and it's actually very divided, Dheeraj, and I'm sharing the result. It's pretty much equally divided between yes, a somewhat, and a no. So I leave it on you now how you want to address this from here on.
Right. I think I had an intuition, before coming into the webinar, and I believe my slides were pretty much aligned to this kind of a response. I don't know, probably that was an intuition, and I guess
Yeah,
it worked. And this is a
great.
great response, right? A mixed response. So
Okay,
good.
look forward to
So
this information, and I'll just again go on mute, and we'll just wait to hear from you to demystify this concept.
absolutely, absolutely. And here is what I need to, so that, and like I very clearly said, I mean, probably the thought process was very much around the thinking and very much around the feeling that, many may not be very well aware of breach and attack simulation. And I wanted to completely demystify certain confusions about such a concept. So I very clearly wanted to reiterate the fact that breach and attack simulation platform is not going to replace a vulnerability assessment platform, right? Or a vulnerability management tool or vulnerability scanners. So if you know vulnerability scanners, they will scan a network for services exposed to known vulnerabilities. It compares against a typical vulnerability database and understand what are the versions of operating systems or applications that are running vulnerable versions of operating systems and applications, and give a point of view on how we can actually kind of update them. And this is of course useful, especially when we have to go through assessing the endpoint related vulnerabilities and all of that. But these risks can always be mitigated by your additional layer of security controls, like IPS, your next gen firewalls, to your web application firewalls, to database activity monitoring, and a plethora of technology solutions are primarily available to address any vulnerabilities that are existent on any of the endpoints, right? And breach and attack simulation tools primarily exist to make sure that the preventive measures, when I say preventive measures, your IPS, the next gen firewalls, your SIM, all of them work correctly or not. Again, I just wanted to once again state that this is definitely not a replacement to your run-of-the-mill penetration testing requirements. Exploitative penetration testing is a highly manual process, and it will try and exploit known vulnerabilities or maybe develop new ones to penetrate a system. And given the cost of these audits, they cannot be run continuously. And once executed, there is no guarantee that the findings will be fixed and would be still valid for months, weeks, or even days after the report is handed over to customers. And with the resource intensity, it is definitely highly impossible to bring in all flavors of an attacker to execute the attack. Moreover, it is time consuming, and it may even take months to perform, which I have already stated. That is what typically happens with a thorough penetration testing exercise. And it could be also intrusive in nature, which would actually kind of have an impact on the organization's business, and wherein breach and attack simulation tools will not be as in-depth as penetration testing, but they will be executed continually, and real attacker behaviors are primarily recreated and performed in real assessment. It is completely off the hands kind of assessment that will be done in recreating any specific behavior that we are typically seeing in an environment. Again, I'm sure that many of you would be very familiar about the concept of red teaming. We want to reiterate that this is also, again, not a replacement to red teaming, especially because red teaming exercises are done in very less frequency. It is usually done in a cyber range context, and I'm sure most of you are aware of cyber range, what it is. It is nothing but it can be easily comparable to a shooting range where the cyber analyst or the security team utilizes that range primarily to make their actual production environment, or which is a subset of it, or a close extraction of their production environment, and try and recreate this attack and try and understand what is the impact. And for that matter, it is definitely not a real thing. And if it is executed, if these kind of attacks are really executed in a real environment, they're again going to be highly manual in nature. And of course, there are chances that these kind of attacks can bring down your entire network as well. So that is where the significance of breach and attack simulations come into place. BAS tools, the breach and attack simulation tools are not here to replace any of these above security products or platforms. It complements with each of these security offerings and services. And all of these security services, they have their own use, and it should be executed as per the needs and their objectives. And BAS tools primarily come to augment the whole security process by being automatic, by being continuous, react to newer threats, provide a continuous baseline which are safe in nature, and which will completely give an overview of what is the risk posture of an organization in today's context. Now let's take a look at a breach and attack simulation deployment. So we always think that networks are simple, which ideally is not true, right? You could see a complicated set of network infrastructure in most of the enterprises today. And when the enterprises are disparate in nature, when they are large, when they are globally spread, you of course have various regions, various branch of offices, co-locations, and of course with that reason, the networks also become extremely complex, right? And we all know that security is as good as the weakest link. So the more the complex the network is, the more security challenges are. The threat vectors are increasing. There could be a weaker remote branch that is primarily trying to connect to your corporate environment, which is pretty much secure and tested and proven. However, there is always an entry point or a backdoor for an attacker utilizing the remote branch and trying to get into your environment. So it primarily means that, more the complexity of the network, more the security challenges are. And in such a case, how do we ensure that everything works in tandem? How do we understand the actual security posture of your overall organization? That is where a typical BAS deployment would primarily help. We would have virtual breach agents that could be placed at strategic zones of your overall network. If you could see those blue wave icons that are placed across these strategic zones, they act as agents, or we could call them as attackers or attackees, and they are virtual agents. And what they primarily do is virtual cyber warfare between the agents. For example, I am trying to access from a remote branch to a specific zone in a corporate network, which is primarily bifurcated or classified by security controls. And I try to utilize a malicious method primarily to access that, or try and recreate an attacker behavior from that remote branch to the accounting section. Ideally, an inline security control should be able to block that. So we recreate, or a BAS platform should ideally recreate real attacker behavior between these two agents and try and assess whatever inline security controls are in place in between the traversal paths should ideally be able to defend that particular attack. If you take the second example or the third example, from a guest Wi-Fi zone, if I am trying to access a particular service, getting into a VIP zone which has higher privilege accesses, and I am trying to laterally move, utilizing the privileges and propagate within that environment, and then communicate back to a command and control center, it is a typical concept of a multi-dimensional malware scenario. A breach and attack simulation platform should ideally have the capability of recreating a multi-dimensional advanced malware kind of scenario on an ongoing basis, trying to understand the effectiveness of these security controls which are placed across your organization. So the concept is all about, on a continual basis, as and when newer threats are available, how do we continually assess the effectiveness by recreating actual hacker behavior? So how does it primarily help? It primarily helps in articulating real value of the cybersecurity investments made. Probably the leadership would have analyzed and understood that there is a real need for having a new security control. But when they place that, they always believe that there is a security control that is placed. And of course, because of that reason, I am secure enough, which is probably not the reality, right? We are working in an assumption that the security control is actually kind of defending against these attacks. And it is not the truth. So such a platform, a breach and attack simulation platform, by continually recreating or emulating legitimate or malicious traffic or attack behaviors, it can very clearly give you a point of view around what is the value of that cybersecurity investment. Is it doing its job as expected? Second, of course, when I go back to statistics, where I referred to errors, that was, and in today's context, that is the most relevant or significant way of, or a tactic of bad actors to breach into an organization. So this continually gives, and most of the times, that the non-conformances or loosely configured policies are the reason for most of the breaches. So a breach and attack simulation platform ideally should or would ensure that loosely configured policies are detected in a timely manner, and respective remediation steps are taken by integrating with the response mechanisms. Third, of course, all this while, we had to rely on point in time tabletop exercises for assessing the actual effectiveness or the understanding of, or the skills of the people who are working in security, primarily to defend against a breach. With the introduction of a breach and attack simulation platform, of course, we can recreate a real incident or a breach, trying to understand if the security staff, right from a security analyst all the way to security leadership, how would they respond in the event of a real breach? I also referred to getting a complete security posture view of the entire estate, especially when organizations are disparate in nature, where they have loosely configured or loosely set up co-locations. That becomes an important entry point for any attackers. So this kind of a platform very clearly gives a point of view on what is the risk posture of that organization. And finally, we have seen products coming and going, and most of the products, either vulnerability management or penetration testing kind of exercises, they just perform the assessment, come out with a report, and it is up to the organization to prioritize and take actions. Here, especially with the, and these kind of platforms can never be a cookie cutter platform where it just sits and does, an assessment. These are platforms, this should primarily give end-to-end automation capabilities, and that is where a fully supported comprehensive RESTful API is required to seamlessly integrate with your prevention controls, to your detection controls, and of course your incident response platforms and solutions as well, right? So as and when the incidents are closed, as and when these incidents are treated as real incidents, the CSIRT team would take remedial actions, and the platform should have the ability and capability to automatically revalidate that assessment and make sure that the incident is really closed. Few of the quick criteria that any breach assessment or a breach and attack simulation platform should have is the heart or the core should definitely be a huge database or library of attack scenarios. And of course, Spirent's data breach assessment platform comes with that. Today, we support 89,000 plus entries. We have a fully automated, fully supported RESTful API and scheduler functions. And all these platforms, as and when we are introducing a newer security product, it shouldn't be adding newer risk to the organization, but rather it should give a point of view on what is the risk. And a breach and attack simulation platform should be looked at as a risk quantification or a risk, view kind of a platform. And of course, because of that reason, it has to be highly safe in nature. With various privilege and access controls. It should also have the seamless integration, like I earlier stated, with threat control and threat prevention and threat detection and threat anticipation tools, and also provide an ability to continually validate and remediate the incidents that we are, reporting. Here is a typical flow of a breach and attack simulation platform. It is easy to use always, as I stated always. It shouldn't add overhead to the administrative functions. So the deployment primarily should be very contextual to an organization where you are defining an end-to-end topology of the network, place the right set of controls, associate the agent, And once the topology creation is done, as and when newer threats are available, you would have heard about a lot of newer attacks and newer malwares that are out in the wild. So as and when newer threats are available, the turnaround time of adding those simulatable instances of attacks should be quick enough so that an organization could run these assessments in their organization and try and understand what would be their impact with their existing security controls, and are there real measures that are required to primarily defend against these attacks. And once the assessment gives a complete point of view of the impact, as well as what remediation steps are done, it can also have a look at an understanding of, if not prevented, what is its ability to primarily detect, and then how we can actually go ahead and respond to these attacks. So here is a typical workflow for primarily assessing the production environment. And this is leveraged by the various threat researches that are available. I mean, provided with the indicators of compromises that are available as a part of threat research. Now, we've been pretty much talking about simulation, right? And as we are ending, I mean, as we are reaching towards the end of our conversation, I wanted to throw certain points around simulation and emulation, and what are those criteria that we should consider while evaluating a typical breach and attack simulation platform, right? Though simulation is a typical word that we all use, it might look like, I mean, it might not be real. So we should be definitely looking at a platform that utilizes emulation, and emulation are often used interchangeably, right? And they are not exactly the same. So emulation is primarily to imitate, replicate, or reproduce the exact scenario such that it recreates a snapshot in time, where simulation is fabrication of a network scenario with the goal to resemble such a scenario that it could be possible or plausible if not evaluated closely, right? I mean, the diagram or the picture itself very clearly articulates the definition of simulation and emulation. And these changes might be seemingly subtle, but the differences are extremely crucial when we are making a decision about security. So if we are taking a decision about security, let it better be accurate, right? We can't rely on a lot of false positives and take security decisions. So when we are evaluating a breach and attack simulation platform, it is extremely important that we consider platforms that utilizes emulation as a concept and not simulation or packet replay. Second, there should be the ability, I mean, the platform should have the ability to actually create complex attacks. In today's situation, in today's case, we are very sure that most of the attackers utilizes encryption to encapsulate their attack traffic, and they kind of encapsulate it over legitimate traffic too, and or even completely encrypt, so that the devices are put into real test, unless and until the security controls have that real ability to look deep inside on that to in the encrypted channel. Only then these kind of complex attacks are seen. And of course, a breach and attack simulation platform where our objective is primarily to assess the effectiveness, it should definitely have the ability to encrypt these attacks over TLS 1.2 or TLS 1.3, where these devices are pretty much put into real test. And finally, if you look at how attackers are being stealthy these days, they perform a lot of covert actions. The dwell time of these attacks and attackers are primarily a long duration. So to really understand, again, if they are, I mean, if these security controls or the defense mechanisms are primarily able to defend against these complex and stealthy attacks, and to really assess its effectiveness, your platform, which is primarily recreating this attacker behavior, should also support, tweaking and recreation of stealthy attacks, especially by the form of evasion techniques. So while evaluating, again, a breach and attack simulation platform, it should, one should definitely assess its capabilities in terms of manipulating traffic, so that if can we introduce an end-to-end delay in the way an attack is done, so that your security controls primarily does not diagnose those as typical attacks. Are there ways of obfuscating certain traffic, be it HTTP traffic or FTP traffic, or any of your HTML traffic, or even the web traffic, primarily in terms of swaying away from your typical web application firewalls or those security control mechanisms. We should also look at the ability for these platforms or recreation of these attacks in such a way that DLP policies are completely kind of bypassed. So these are few of the areas one should actually be looking at, or the criteria one should be looking at while evaluating a breach and attack simulation platform, right? So keeping in mind the time, I definitely wanted to once again summarize a breach and attack simulation platform. While it is not really a vulnerability management platform, or neither a red teaming exercise nor a replacement for exploitative penetration testing, it is a mechanism of performing virtual cyber warfare between the various agents that are placed across your network environment by utilizing fully emulated traffic, utilizing various evasion techniques and encryption for making an attack extremely complex, and then assess the effectiveness of your security controls or the defense mechanisms in your environment, so that we really understand the actual security posture of that organization. Meanwhile, it should also have the ability to seamlessly integrate with various of your detection mechanisms, including SIM to EDR to a lot of these analytics platform, and at the same time support end-to-end mitigation and incident response activities by integrating with service desks and security orchestration automation platforms. And again, how a breach and attack simulation platform can give much more value or can be differentiated among the typical offerings. It should have a great library of threats and scenarios that could be emulated or recreated. And at the same time, the threat database has to evolve based on the kind of threats that we see on a regular basis. So that was it from my side. Thank you for the patient listening, and the floor is all open. I think we have precisely 8 minutes to take up few questions, and the floor is all open for questions. Shubhra, over to you.
Thanks, Dheeraj. We have a lot of questions coming in, and we were just right now compiling those questions. So thank you everyone for sending in your questions. As the time permits, we will take in as many as possible. So without any further ado, so we have actually a couple of questions from Kavya, and let me see if I can unmute her and allow her to ask her questions. Kavya, I'm assuming it's Kavya and not Kavya or anyone else. I have unmuted you. You're self-muted at this point of time. Would you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Shubhra. Hi, Dheeraj. This is Kavya here. I like the concept behind breach and attack simulation, the BAS. I just wanted to understand more about it. Is it similar to deception technology?
Great question. Great question. Let me answer this question by probably helping you understand what a deception technology is. Right? Deception is nothing but an advanced, honeypot, where we are luring attackers to a typical organization by showcasing vulnerable systems, right? And you put breadcrumbs or lure the breadcrumbs in the form of various vulnerabilities, put a machine in your environment which has vulnerabilities and try to really attract these attackers, right? You deceive them and you detect them and make sure that, they are completely, responded to or blocked. So deception technology is a detection platform, where the breach and attack simulation platform is a platform utilized to understand if your deception technology is really working as expected, right? I could once again relate, for example, in an IPS, the IPS vendor, or probably your SIM vendor. I'm sure that you'd be knowing about analytics tools and the SIM tools and all. So
Yeah.
there are, detection logics primarily created on a SIM tool to detect a specific attack, right? And it is as good as a dummy box if we do not have the right rules created. So a breach and attack simulation platform, what it does is it end-to-end recreates. It is not real attack, but it is as good as real attack. Try to understand if your deception technology or your SIM platform, are they able to detect this kind of an attack as expected? So deception falls under detection, and this is more or less a threat management or a threat. I would call it as a threat validation or a validation mechanism to understand the effectiveness of your security controls in your environment.
Basically an evaluation technique.
Absolutely, a continuous evaluation technique. Absolutely, yes.
Thanks. I had one more question. In one of your slides, you had mentioned, key line in that one bullet was there under key sections, like on Mitre, AT&CK framework. I just wanted to understand more about it from, if you can elaborate what are its benefits and examples, if you can cite one or two of its applications for an IT product development company, and what would be the cost involved around this to establish in any organization, because we go with the ideas to our management and definitely the budget and all these things come into picture. So if you could cite an example and if possible also let us know the cost in around this.
Absolutely. So I believe there was a similar question from Ashwini Pandey about around MITRE's attack model. So
Yes.
let me try and club the questions together. So to answer the question, we all know MITRE's attack model is nothing but the curated database of all the tactics, techniques, and procedures used by real attackers. It is nothing but an open database used by real attackers to breach into an environment, to an organization. So what we have done is we have a repository or a library of close to 89,000 attack scenarios today. And we keep adding close to 4,000 entries every month in the form of applications, attacks, and malware. And what we have done is these attack scenarios are primarily classified into the various tactics and techniques. And if I have to assess an organization utilizing a specific framework, which is MITRE's attack model, one tactic is primarily, pretty much command and control under MITRE's attack model. So if I have to assess the impact of command and control attacks against the organization, I can just pick and choose that MITRE's attack model tactic of command and control and see what is the impact. As you know, as we move towards the end of MITRE's attack model, the impact of that particular attack would be much higher, because if you see kill chain or any of these typical frameworks, the initial bit of it primarily would be reconnaissance or delivery or installation and so on and so forth. So it gives a complete point of view around where does it stand from an attack impact standpoint, and we can pick and choose what type of attacks can be initiated and what will be the impact of it. Another slightly different context is again the platform. Even in our platform, I'm very much relating to our platform. In our platform, we also have the ability of testing an organization against the various attacker groups. So there are various APT groups like APT 29 to APT 30 to Lazarus to Karbanak and all of that, which are notorious or well-known APT groups that consistently attack organizations. So we have around 84 attacker groups which utilizes various of these tactics and techniques. And if I have to create an assessment, completely schedule it and run it as and when newer IOCs come in, I can schedule that assessment and understand what will be the impact of that particular hacker group or an APT group into to the organization. Does that give a reasonable point of view, Kavya? And I'm sure Ashwini would have also been hearing this. So we can definitely take up a detailed conversation, keeping in the interest of time, as well as I'm sure that there would be multiple questions too. Right?
Yeah. Thanks, Dheeraj. Thanks for the update.
Thank you, Kavya. So we have a couple of questions, but I think in the interest of time, we can perhaps take just one more question. So we have a question from Sairam Sudarsanam, who asks, what is the main goal of APT attacks and how to defend these attacks?
Right. Good question. So APT, like it very clearly says, it is persistent threats, right? I mean, they have multiple objectives, multiple goals, right? It depends on each of these APT groups. Certain APT groups are state funded. Certain APT groups are criminal syndicates. Where they have intentions of, taking ransoms. Some are completely, if you look at it, some definitely wanted to look at the availability bit and make sure that the availability is down, probably the state funded ones. So there are multiple objectives of APT groups, and it depends on each of these groups. You could see that various APT groups rely on various things, and for us to really defend against that, we of course have a lot of anti-APT solutions, right from understanding the various indicators of compromises of these APT groups, making sure that right prevention controls are in place, and if there are no prevention, there, we definitely have the ability to detect those, right, with the help of various detection platforms and response platforms. You could see a plethora of AI and ML driven platforms which utilizes statistical algorithms to understand these unknown attack types and unknown attackers. So it all depends on what type of APT group are we trying to defend. And of course, the idea of a breach and attack simulation platform is to ensure that all those known APT groups, IOCs or indicators of compromises are available. And if I recreate these indicators of compromise in my environment, based even with the availability of multiple prevention and detection controls, how well they can defend against these APT groups or APT attacks.
Okay, thanks, Dheeraj. I understand there are many questions that are coming in and we have not been able to address those, but of course, we have an ID called webinar@denave.com, which is webinar@denave.com. Feel free to drop in your further questions or asks on that ID, and we'll be more than happy to pass it on to Dheeraj and take his time over there. It was obviously 1 hour totally full of the agenda. What the expectation that we had from the session has been hopefully totally met. From our end, we think it was a lot of information and great knowledge sharing that happened. And we hope that for the audience also, it was equally, it was a learning experience, and you were able to meet the expectation with which you came into this session. Like I said in the beginning, this the content is pretty much accessible on Denave's Facebook page. This webinar is currently being live streamed, so if you want to access the presentation, its content, or anything anytime, you can just go on to Denave's Facebook page, and you'll be able to view it there. In few hours from now, it will also be accessible on our YouTube channel. And more than that, you will get an email from us with the link of the YouTube, the YouTube video. So it will land in your inbox, so you can access the content anytime. Like I said, feel free to reach out to us on webinar@denave.com anytime. And thank you, Dheeraj. Thanks once again for being a great speaker. And we totally enjoyed this session today.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone, and have a great weekend. I hope.
Thanks everyone. Yes, everyone, please have a great weekend. Stay home and stay safe. Thank you.